This is episode 4 with Cade Courtley. Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for men who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of their lives. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. Hello and welcome to another episode of Self-Made Man. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I have the opportunity to introduce you to a real American hero, Mr. Cade Courtley, who is a friend of mine here in Austin. And Cade is about as close to a real-world Rambo as you can possibly get. After 19 months, 2 hell weeks, 3 broken legs, and a fractured skull, Cade graduated from BUD/S as a Navy SEAL. He was then tapped to become a SEAL team sniper. And after 9 years of active duty leading high-risk operations around the world, he would go on to become a platoon commander for the SEALs and eventually return to the Navy's Special Warfare Center as a BUD/S instructor. After a few years of retirement, opportunity came knocking when he received a phone call to participate in Mark Burnett's Combat Missions television show, and his new career landed him in Hollywood, where he made several more television and film appearances, including a series for Spike TV, worked as a technical advisor, a stuntman, and wrote and produced a screenplay. And frankly, in a world where real men have become a dying breed, it is my privilege to introduce you to one of the baddest and bravest out there, Mr. Cade Courtley. So please welcome him to the show. Cade Courtley, welcome to Self-Made Man.
Thank you, Mike. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. So you and I have gotten a chance to become friends over the last year here in Austin. And I believe we met through our friend Chris Daigle.
Yep.
Which was awesome. And we had nothing in common whatsoever.
Yeah, Baja racing, love of race cars, guns, et cetera, et cetera. Nothing in common.
Entrepreneurship, business.
Right.
And so this was a really unique opportunity that I've been looking forward to because, you know, with the mission of Self-Made Man, it is founded upon a value system that I unfortunately believe has started to fade here in the United States, specifically over the last generation. And the goal of this program is to really bring those back to the forefront. And your past and your history as a Navy SEAL and much more in addition to that, I believe is a perfect example, of the type of values that are necessary in order to do what you have done.
Well, I tell you what, I couldn't agree more with your assessment of sort of what I call the pussification of America. It's kind of tragic. I remember looking at my grandfather, and that was the greatest generation. And I think in 10 years from now, we'll look back at the millennials and be like, are you fucking kidding me? So anything we can do to try and swing back towards a tough man with a sense of values. And I've got 2 sisters, and they said, hey, one of the greatest compliments they ever paid me was, you ruined us because we have an idea of what a man should act like and be like, and then there's the rest. So, like I said, it was a very nice compliment.
Well, let's start a little bit with your history because it's pretty substantial in your story as well. And I'd first like to know what inspired you to join the military, and then when you joined, what inspired you to pursue a career as a SEAL and to get you through BUD/S and all of that stuff?
Mm-hmm. My grandfather was a flight instructor back then it was the Army Air Corps. So there was always that little seed that had been planted. And when I turned 16, I started taking private pilot lessons because that made sense. And I always had an interest in aviation. Boom, Top Gun comes out. And this is back when Tom Cruise was still considered cool.
Hey, that was my favorite movie.
I was like, Top Gun, that's it. I'm going to be a naval aviator. So I started looking into officer programs and got dialed in to go ahead and go through ROTC which is one of the commissioning sources. I didn't want to go to the Naval Academy because I still wanted to have a life. I still wanted that college experience. Nothing against Academy grads, but they go in as 18-year-olds and they come out 4 years later as 18-year-olds. So I got the best of both worlds, University of San Diego, and also the day I graduated, I was commissioned as an officer and ensign in the United States Navy. Back up about 2 years, halfway through college, I was involved in an accident during spring break, and I was blind in my right eye for about 48 hours. And I was very fortunate. My eyesight came back almost completely, but not enough to be considered perfect, which is what was required back then for anybody in the pilot or the flight program. So I did a little soul searching that summer, and I kind of consider that a blessing in disguise because I started learning about SEALs. And this is way before the movies, the books. I think the only thing that had been out about the SEALs at that point was like a really cheesy Charlie Sheen movie.
What year is this right now?
Okay, so this is 1990. So I learned about the SEALs and it really stuck. I mean, it really did. I was one of these guys who, as I was growing up, as I was younger, I was a late bloomer. So I was always skinnier, shorter. I was always trying twice as hard to keep up athletically and stuff like that. At the time, it was incredibly frustrating. And I look back on that now as a blessing because it made me very tenacious at an early age. So about the time I'm thinking about wanting to become a SEAL, it was a perfect fit because I had such a chip on my shoulder at that point. And I needed something. I basically was looking for the hardest thing I could find to see if I had what it took to do that. And that was the SEAL teams. And so 2 years later in 92, when I graduated from the University of San Diego, I head on over to BUDS, which is Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training in Coronado. And I got everything and more that I was asking for in SEAL training.
Well, so I've seen all of the documentaries on BUDS and all of that. And essentially you're looking at Olympic level athleticism combined with physical torture on top of it. I mean, how would you describe it?
Well, okay, so the equation is this. It's 100% physical and 100% mental. So do the math there. Absolutely. My personal experience, SEAL training or BUDS is about 7 months long if you go straight through it, start to finish. It took me 19 months because of 2 broken right legs, a broken left leg. And when I say 2 broken right legs, I broke it twice, and a fractured skull from getting run over by a boat. So my tour of duty there was a little longer than it was supposed to be. And by the time 19 months later I finally got out, I was like one of Michael Vick's dogs, man. I was so pissed at the world. But that also served me well. But it's interesting. You know, I tell people the story all the time. Going through Hell Week, in my SEAL class, there was this guy who was considered the number 10 triathlete in the United States. And I'll just call him Tim. And Tim was one of these guys. He was breathing through his nose on the sand runs while we're all dying. He was dry and done with the swim before we were halfway done. He was literally like what you would consider the poster child for BUDS, for SEAL training. Until Tim got into Hell Week, which is 6 days up all the time. You get maybe a combined total of 45 minutes of sleep during 6 days. You're always hypothermic. You're running around with a raft on your head. You end up with a bald spot. And it's meant to closely resemble what combat would be like, just to sort of see, okay, these guys made it through Hell Week. Now we can start teaching some stuff like shooting, demolition, diving. Day 2, Tim, the poster child, 10th rate triathlete in the United States, quits because Tim had never felt that kind of a struggle before. So while amazing athleticism is great, it's not enough. And he was done after 2 days, where the guy right next to him, who I'll call Seaman Wood, 130 pounds soaking wet, he had been challenged every day of his life. So for him, Hell Week was just another 6 days. And that's where I tell you about that combination of, you know, physical and mental and the heart to get through something like that. Tim didn't have it. Seaman Wood did.
Wow. Yeah, it's that is accurate compared to the stories that I've heard. And while my challenges have been nowhere near what BUDS is, it was very similar. I was a late bloomer as well in high school. Always the smallest one in my class, you know, kind of situation. And I took on cycling as my challenge and mountain biking specifically. And so every single day after school, you know, 50 miles a day, that turned into some, you know, success in a short pro cycling career. But it was that outlet for me to go out, and it was up to me. I didn't have a coach. I didn't have anyone saying I had to get out and do it. I just went out and did it because I had to prove to myself that I was able to do it.
And obviously at the time, it's incredibly frustrating. I mean, you're 15, 14, 16 years old, and you're on a prom date and she's a foot taller than you. And that doesn't make sense, but that fire that created, and I think you can understand that, what you get out of something like that, especially for the rest of your life, it is totally invaluable. I wouldn't have changed it if I could.
So that's almost at the heart of, you know, this conversation, which is, you know, you brought up the millennial generation today, and I'm not going to pick a generation because, you know, they all have the same group of people in there, but I understand what you're saying in the fact that for the most part today, specifically here in the United States, you know, people's biggest concern is whether or not, you know, their Wi-Fi is LTE or 4G, or whether or not their app is working, you know, that day. And the amount of whining and crying that you see today around people saying something that is considered offensive is absolutely unbelievable. People have no thick skin whatsoever. You and I had a discussion about this last time we were hanging out, where we were both kind of hoping that something happens, with this country that forces people to challenge themselves once again and get perspective on what is actually important and that life is actually about, versus the illusion that everybody lives in right now.
Yeah, look, it's probably a little unfair for me to generalize the millennials because there's excellence in every age group.
Right. Yeah.
But that said, the trend that I see with the people that are younger than me is disturbing. You talk about challenges. A challenge for them is going a couple hours without their cell phone.
Right.
Things like that. Hey, try going a couple of days without eating. They would not understand that concept. They would have their lawyer on speed dial. So it's just, it's that sort of thing. And I quietly hope that we get our butt kicked a little bit, because until something like that happens, we as a nation will not grow stronger. We will continue to become weaker. Again, that's my personal opinion.
So you made it through Buds, and then what? Off to combat?
So then I was assigned to SEAL Team 1 as a lieutenant. So I was lucky enough as an officer to get the opportunity to go to sniper school, which was the single toughest thing I ever did in my time in the military. The discipline alone required to be good at that skill.
Which part was the most challenging?
The instructor I had at the time was a huge runner. So we all were running 10 miles just to start our morning. So 10 miles is great when you're $150. When you're 210, 10 miles every morning sucks balls. But it was his show, and we were just, we were renting out space. The great thing about that, though, is it was also amazing for controlling heart rate and things like that, which is vital to squeezing off that perfect shot. But I think overall, the discipline required to be good at that skill, to be a good sniper, to sit on that scope for hours on end, why you've just pissed yourself because you can't move and you're getting eaten alive and it's 110 degrees out, and just the discipline required to stay focused and wait for that window of opportunity, which might only be 2 or 3 seconds of somebody walking past. It's great. And unfortunately, incredibly perishable skill. If I had got back on a long gun now, I'd want to do it by myself for about a month straight before anybody was around looking around, or be putting sniper to shame.
So you went through sniper school, and then what?
So after sniper school, I was Assistant Platoon Commander, SEAL Team 2. This is back in the day before we were in Iraq and Afghanistan full time, where the SEAL teams were divided by world geography. So SEAL Team 2, we basically had Europe. And during that time frame, so that way you were able to train for your environment. And then with the rotating schedule being 6 months there or 6 months off, our platoon was going to be over there during the winter. So it was amazing. We were a winter warfare platoon at SEAL Team 1. And so part of that training was an additional 3 months in Alaska. And if you want to laugh your ass off, you look at a bunch of Navy SEALs on skis for the first time, and it's pure comedy. But it was amazing training. Just learning how to comfortably live in that environment with what you have in a pack for 5, 6, 7 days, and really refining that. It was great. It was an amazing experience. I loved it.
So tell me what it's like to, be with a group of guys that you're putting, your life essentially in their hands, and they're putting their lives in your hands. What are the values that you guys live by? Is there a code of honor? Is there an unspoken or spoken, list of values here that you guys?
Well, I tell you what, the great thing about why SEAL training is so difficult, and only 3 of the guys, or basically 10 guys start, only 3 guys make it to graduation. That attrition rate has been the same for the last 50 plus years. And the reason why it's so difficult is that final product that you end up with. I guess the best way to put this is the reason we keep getting the phone call to do these ops is because now we've proven the fact that we can do it right. We can do it quickly. Our mission success rate is through the roof. So you're doing something right when an Army general says, let's send the Navy SEALs in to do this job, which is great. And it's something we're really proud of. And it's not to take away from any of the other services, because anybody who serves is awesome. And there's highly elite folks in the Army, the Air Force, and the Marines. But SEAL Team's been doing it right, and that's great. But that all comes from the foundation, from training. And like when you're going through SEAL training, you can never be more than 6 feet away from a guy, or you pay the man, you're getting in the surf. So you're learning that teamwork and that swim buddy early on, and you're going through all this pain together, which just does nothing but takes a bunch of individuals and forges them into this amazing weapon. And my personal favorite regarding the way the Navy SEALs have put together training is officers enlisted, they go through everything together. And that's the way it's got to be for the type of unit that we've created, or the teams that you have once you go to one of the SEAL teams. And I love that, because instead of a little bit of the us or them which mentality, which you'll see in some of the other services, it's like, hey, we went through this together. You already know each other. There's a level of respect. If you've made it through SEAL training, you've already proven yourself to a certain degree, and then you just continue to prove yourself from there. And, I didn't realize how special that was until I came off of active duty and realizing, oh, wow, I'm no longer surrounded by excellence every day of my life and surrounded by people I trust with my life. I didn't realize how special that was until I got out, ended up in Hollywood, and it could not have been more different.
Well, before we get into that part of your story, when you were out there in active duty, who were you fighting for? Were you fighting for God and country? Were you fighting for yourself? Were you fighting because that's what you were trying to do? Were you fighting for your buddies? What were you out there for?
Look, I can tell you the only thing that goes through your mind when you're heading out the door and you're going on deployment, wherever that may be, is number one is the guy next to you. Or in my case, it was all of my guys, being a platoon commander. And then somewhere down the road, it's getting back home to family. And in between that is mission success. So I've got my teammate, we've got our mission, and then, oh, by the way, it would be nice to be able to get back home. But that's definitely a distant third. You cannot afford to be thinking about home when you're over there, because if you're even 5% off on your focus, that's when guys get hurt and killed.
Yeah.
And it literally is, once that door shuts on the plane and you're leaving the U.S., it's game on until that door opens again and you're back in the United States. People not involved or haven't been around that type of, a unit mentality or in a group like that, I'll get questions like, well, what did you think of the politics? Was it the right thing to do? Was it wrong? Did you like the administration? That doesn't even come close. That's not even among the top 100 things that you would think about. You are there to do a job. You want to do it well, and you want everybody to come back from that mission. And that's it.
Very cool. And so you were active duty for how many years?
So I did 9 years active duty.
And, what do you do when you come back from that? Because, I've read countless stories of guys who come back from serving in the military and they're lost and they don't know what to do. They're missing that kind of brotherhood and camaraderie, and it's no longer available in the workplace.
You're absolutely right. I went through this myself. You put so much into becoming part of that group, to becoming a SEAL, to having that team. When you're not working, you're playing together. That is your family. And when I didn't realize this, but when you leave that family, you almost have an identity crisis. It's like, okay, I was a Navy SEAL, and it's, okay, once a SEAL, always a SEAL, but you no longer have that team. So you're like, okay, where's my family? What's my mission? Who am I? So many people go through that when they come out of that. Unfortunately, I love the fact that PTSD is something that's on the radar in a big way, and people are taking a look at that in a serious way. I'm a little concerned that it's come a little bit too far now. And so it's like, I was out to dinner the other night, and I was telling this lady that I used to be in the military, and she's like, well, were you in long enough to have PTSD? And I was like, oh,
jeez.
I know. That's what I said too. I go, look, I go, just because you're a vet and you serve doesn't mean you have PTSD. And to a large extent, it's a very small group of people, especially in special operations, that end up with that, because you've put so much of your time and energy and dedicated so much to get in the game.
You've gone through what you went through because you truly wanted to be there. You
want to be there. Now, like Vietnam's a good example. The draft.
Yeah.
The vast majority of those folks did not only not want to be there, they didn't want to be in the military. So mentally, they probably weren't as prepared to see some and do some of the things they did.
Right.
That's not the case in SEAL team.
Right.
If you become a Navy SEAL, you were completely and fully committed from day one.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you came back, you went into what?
So I got out of the Navy and actually was invited to be part of a TV show that Mark Burnett did. And Mark Burnett, the creator of Survivor and The Apprentice and all those. So Mark...
Small shows.
Yeah, those little things. He'll probably do all right in that business. But basically, Mark had just finished a really successful season of Survivor. He wanted to do the same type of show, but it was military and law enforcement competing against each other. And we were recreating these missions. So I got a phone call from him. I had basically gotten accepted to go to an MBA program up at University of Southern California, but it was going to be in a month. So I had this kind of time off, and I was like, yeah, sure, that sounds like fun. We'll go, recreate this stuff and be competitive. And it was a lot of fun, actually. And Mark pulled me aside and said, hey, you were really great. You're great on camera. Have you ever thought about going out to Hollywood? And I was like, what would I do out there? He's like, oh, you name it. Why don't you just put school on hold for a year and give it a shot? I kind of wish I never listened to him, but I decided to do that. So I ended up in Hollywood about a month after I came off active duty, and natural progression was stunt work. And, they're the best up there. The stunt guys work hard and play hard, and it was a perfect fit. And then I guess they figured out that I was fairly articulate. So they said, I started doing some acting. It took me all of about a year to figure out I was a terrible actor. So I retired from that. But in the meantime, I was also doing a lot of writing based on some of my previous experiences in the military that people found interesting. And I was able to, sell four screenplays, and one of them got produced. And
is it one we would know of?
Maybe. I tell you what, it was Sony bought it. And they had given us this grand plan of this is going to be a perfect movie for the next group of action heroes. And I couldn't have been more excited. I was like, yes, awesome. And then we get a call about 2 months later. Hey, so Jean-Claude Van Damme read your script and we owe him one more movie, so he's going to do your movie. And we're like, oh, it could have been so awesome. So it went from like the next amazing action movie to Kung Fu Van Damme.
Did it get made?
Yeah, it did. It actually went straight to video. It's called The Shepherd Border Patrol.
Yes, so, I don't remember hearing about that.
Yeah, you know what? Most people did. It was great for like stocking stuffers and stuff like that. But, yeah.
Bummer. So, what did you experience when you were back in the real world, and how did you feel about it? Did it motivate you? And then obviously we're going to get into what you've been up to these last couple of years, but I would love to hear about that transition and, what you did during those years.
Well, I tell you what, like I said earlier, it was incredibly frustrating for me. And it was a little bit of I kind of stepped back because like I said, I went from that family, the team, and the mission to, okay, I'm not in that anymore. And I didn't realize how difficult that was going to be. And, I don't mind saying that I then went to an industry or a job that has no rules. You really can't trust anybody for the most part. And although that was my choice to put myself in that, it could not have been further from my previous job. There was no code. There was no I got your back. It was more like I just stabbed you in the back. And that was my personal experience with Hollywood. And so that added to the frustration of, where's my family? What's my mission? And so then along comes 9/11. And I sat there and watched those buildings fall, and I was like,
new mission.
I'm still fresh. I'm still current. I'm in good shape, and I want a little payback, just like most everybody else who saw that day. 9/11 ended up about a month and a half later becoming the birth of the independent contractor, specifically Blackwater. Now, Blackwater was just a training facility pre 9/11, but the phone started ringing, and basically Eric Prince, the owner, was asked to, hey, could you put together a group of guys that are just recently off of active duty? They still have their skills, and, we can utilize them for this or that. Well, this or that ended up being a privatized army, basically, that was working for the agency, State Department, et cetera, et cetera. And so early Blackwater was awesome because everybody had worked together. We all knew each other. It was that family was back together again. So again, it was my family. We had a mission, and early on, it was a cool mission. I mean, it was great. Like most things that get too big too quick, certain things start falling, and unfortunately for Blackwater, standards started dropping because the demand was just there. We were at war in two countries, and you didn't have enough military to cover both.
Well, and you guys, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the appeal of the private side is that they're not under the same rules, regulations, and scrutiny as the traditional military.
That is accurate. The reason why the privatized stuff can be so effective is we aren't under the same, I would say, rules of engagement. We aren't wearing the uniform of the United States military, and that offers, in addition to other things, flexibility and deniability. And when you have that and you're in a war zone, you can be incredibly effective with a small unit. And we were early on. But as I alluded to, it started getting too big too quick. I mean, when we'd go back, you'd have to do refresher training every 6 months, across the board, shooting, driving, small unit tactics, which was great to maintain that level of readiness. And so we'd start going back to these refresh courses, the original group, and you'd start seeing guys and be like, so what did you do in the military? Well, I was a Stinger missile operator. Really? Did you ever fire one? No. Like, it was like, oh man. And we all saw that. So basically that core group, we saw the writing on the wall. We knew it was going to happen. And we all kind of jumped ship to another company that had the same contract. And that's what we started doing because, you could have the most amazing training facility in the world, but independent contractor, that line of work is all about the men. And where the men go, that's where the contract goes. And so we started manipulating it a little bit and saying, all right, we want to get paid a little bit more and we want this. And if you're not going to do that, we're going to go over to company B or company C or company D and they'll do it. And that's what we ended up doing. That's
just a fascinating way to make a living with this particular set of skills that are not necessarily applicable back home.
And it was weird. I was living a double life. I would literally go over to Afghanistan and Iraq for 2 months. And then I'd come back to Los Angeles and I'd pick up some stunt work. I'd do a TV commercial. I'd start writing another script and I'd be like, getting the itch again. I'd get on the phone and be like, hey, I'm ready to go. Send me out the door. And then I'd go for another 2 months. So it was a trip. I literally was, like an example of this, I had just come out of a tour in Iraq and I got flown directly to London. And 48 hours from being in Baghdad, I'm in front of a camera shooting a pilot for this new show on Spike TV. Like 48 hours later, I was still picking sand out of my ear holes. And I'm in front of the camera. I was like, this is so bizarre. But it was fun at the same time.
So these days you've turned into quite the entrepreneur. And why don't you talk a little bit about the ventures that you've set up over the last couple of years?
Well, coming from you, Mike, that's a nice compliment. And I appreciate that. As things went on with the Hollywood stuff, I started moving into a category which ended up being the survival stuff. So I did several shows on survival, and it was a perfect fit given my previous military time and training and stuff like that. And from there, I created a company called SEAL Survival, and we do things anywhere from personalized training. We have a small product line of go bags. I wrote a survival guide called the SEAL Survival Guide, and we do some other things, which I call sort of problem solving. So somebody has a unique legal problem. I've got a crew of guys I can get on the phone with, and we can be there and take care of that in a short period of time effectively. And it's been a lot of fun, that company. And now I'm branching off into some other stuff here in Austin to include getting involved in the coffee business of all things.
Yeah, well, let's definitely touch on that. But before you go that direction, you and I have talked about doing a follow-up to the podcast, which is basically on survival and preparedness, but doing that in a video format, which I think would be much more effective. And so we're going to do that at some point here in the next month or two. But if you will, this is a topic that I have touched on probably once or twice a year since 2007, 2008, 2009, specifically after the economic crash took place, with the understanding that if you continue to study finance in the world of economics, you are very well aware that what we are living through right now is a giant, giant bubble of historic magnitude. There has never been more debt or more currency to the point, when you include derivatives of hundreds of trillions of dollars, it's completely unprecedented. And so there is only one direction or one conclusion that this ends up in. And now we've got flare-ups back in the Middle East again with Iran and Israel. We've got flare-ups with Russia happening in the Ukraine. We've got China, saying, "Oh, this looks like fun," and they're getting stronger and stronger by the month and by the year. And if you read a book called The Fourth Turning, which is one of the most phenomenal and fascinating books that I've ever read, It really is about the cycles of life and history. And I'm not going to go into the details of it, but in conclusion, history runs on 100-year cycles divided into 25-year seasons, summer, winter, fall, spring. And right now we've entered winter, which I believe happened in 2006, which these guys predicted in the 90s when they wrote the book. And it's going to end, between 2020 and 2025. And the unfortunate part about a winter season is that over the past 400 years, it has always ended in war, including the Civil War and all of the other big ones that we've had here in the United States throughout our history. And it is gearing up, to end in that kind of circumstance once again. And unfortunately, this will be the first time that it happens with the kind of weaponry that is so prolific throughout the world. And so I feel that it is an unbelievably important part of being a self-made man, which I include the word self-reliant in that description of a self-made man, having the ability to take care of your immediate self, your family, and your friends from a basic needs perspective of food, water, shelter, and protection. And so this is something that I've done for myself over the last few years. It's something that I believe that you obviously feel strongly about as well with your book and your business. So if you could share your 2-minute spiel to folks listening to this right now, if they haven't taken care of some of these basic necessities and preparations, hopefully give them some motivation.
I think it's incredibly naive to think that nothing bad will ever happen to you. I mean, it really is. It's even more naive to think that you're prepared for something like this if you haven't made any preparations. So let's take this on a small scale. Humans can go for about 3 days without water. Okay, you can last multiple weeks without food, but 3 days without water. All right, so even just taking an hour out of your month to make sure you have extra water, non-perishable food, some clothing, things that would make sense. Just literally that would take you an hour to do that. I mean, that's going to be invaluable if and when something bad happens. Let's take this on a small scale. Hurricane Katrina, not so small if you lived there, but it's a rare known fact that half of the deaths from Hurricane Katrina were violent related deaths, not from the storm, not from flooding, violent related deaths. Okay, so there was essentially anarchy during and after that storm. Let's take it on another sort of small scale. Superstorm Sandy. There were city blocks less than a mile away from New York City, Manhattan, that were dealing with the same sort of thing. Looting, violent deaths and things like that. That was a mile away from Manhattan. But that's what happened when they went without electricity for a little over 12 hours. That started happening. You take that on a national scale. You take and remove electricity, be it heat, what have you, light in the United States, and you watch what happens to our population literally in a period of a couple of hours. You watch what happens to people in the United States when they don't eat for a day. I mean,
don't eat for a day. Don't have an outlet for distraction or information with the internet or their cell phone. It doesn't work. So they have literally nothing to do anymore. Yep. Their toilet doesn't flush and water doesn't come out of the faucet and the fridge doesn't work.
You will see the absolute worst in humanity. Okay. You will see a very small group. And I hope through things like this, that small group becomes larger of people who have been prepared for food, water, shelter, and a really important one, security. You're going to see those people. They will be the ones that when the sun comes back up and the dust settles, that'll be the 5% that's still walking around. And again, I sound like it's a doomsday kind of situation, but it is. It is. And we have got it so bloated as a nation. We are literally following the path like any great empire. And unfortunately, we're on the downward trend of this. And what happens to all those when they hit rock bottom? The strong survive and they start the rebuilding process. And like you alluded to earlier, I kind of fear that we're on that path. And I don't think the bottom is that far away. So why not take an hour out of your week to do the basic stuff? And then take another hour that next week and start thinking about doing some training, and maybe another hour that following week and train your kids and get yourself a go bag, which is It's a small bag that you keep either in your car, under your bed, or at work. And it's one of those things that you have the necessities that will get you through 24 to 72 hours. Start with that. I don't want to condone, hey, I've got 8,000 rounds of ammunition and I've got 185 days of food. Start small and work yourself up to that. I mean, it's a great place to be, but it doesn't take that much time or energy or money to get some of those basics in that some people just are nowhere near being prepared to do.
Well, it drives me crazy because we both have a lot of very, very successful mutual friends here in Austin. Unbelievably smart, talented, guys specifically that I'm thinking about here in my head that still have taken zero steps, despite the fact they have more than enough money, more than enough time freedom, more than enough brains to do this. But there is still this factor that comes into their mentality that's like, it'll never happen.
And those are going to be the first guys that are getting torn apart and put on the open flames and being barbecued out on the street. I mean, I hate to say it, but those are those guys.
No, are you? No, that's a pretty damn dramatic statement.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm glad you mentioned that.
Speaking from experience.
Yeah. You watch Walking Dead, and those will be the first ones that end up getting eaten. So let me back up just a minute here. There's I wouldn't say it's even a fine line, but there's being prepared and being vigilant and then living your life in a confident and comfortable way. And then there's going a little bit too far. And I would never condone the guy who's sharpening his 8,000 knives in the basement in his underwear with all the peanut butter. But please do start with the basics. Think about it. Think about what would I do if I lost power for a day
or a week, right?
What are you going to do? Yeah. I have people saying, well, something as simple as your hot water heater. That thing stores upwards of 50 gallons of water. That's potable. You can drink that. And they're like, oh, I never thought about that before. Well, yeah. I mean, really, just take a little bit of time in your day and think about this. Well,
we'll save this for a full on episode with some video, and we'll go through the kind of gear that you and I have and that you talk about at SEAL Survival and all of that good stuff. So over the last couple of years, you've really branched out on your own. You've started the SEAL Survival business, and now you've ventured into the coffee world. So talk a little bit about that, because we definitely have quite a few listeners on this show who are entrepreneurs. And what's the goal behind the coffee business? But most importantly, I would love to know from an education perspective for those listening is, what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned, so far, for better or for worse?
Mm-hmm. So recently I've started up a company called Doorbean, and Doorbean is an internet subscription-based company that will deliver coffee to homes and offices. And when I say deliver coffee, it'll be whole bean, ground, and we're even going to have K-Cups available. And that'll be done on a subscription basis where you'll get it once a month, or we can even do it twice a month based on your quantity that you desire. I mean, we're loving it. There's certain things I linked up with. Austin's such a great town. It's literally a one-stop shop for startups. You've got everything and everybody you need right here in this town to get a startup up, running, and become incredibly, successful. The great thing about coffee is 87% of Americans will drink a cup a day. 56% of Americans admit to being addicted to it. And it's legal, and for the most part, it's healthy. So when you have a potential customer base like that, why not get into it? And the great thing about the subscription delivery sort of business model right now is you take your Dollar Shave Club or your Birchbox. 2 or 3 years ago, I don't think this would have been, it was too early for it. But now people are ordering groceries and having delivered consumables like that. It's becoming something that is just part of the norm. Hey, I don't want to deal with getting diapers. Oh, great. They showed up at the door every 2 weeks. That's what we're going to do with coffee.
Once you try it and you see that that's possible, you're on it. It's like trying Uber for the first time. And like once you try Uber, then you're hooked. Mm-hmm. So once I tried Instacart here with Whole Foods and, just jump on the app, order all my stuff, mm-hmm. Toilet paper, paper towels, water bottles, all of the big bulky stuff that I don't want to go deal with, myself. An hour later, it's here at the house.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. And what we're doing with Doorbean is we're offering six different selections. So you can get a coffee from 5 different countries based on what you like. This is the quality's through the roof. It's great stuff. And then there's a decaf option. And then we also started talking about the K-Cups, which continue to be really, really successful just based on convenience factor. And back to why the coffee business, I remember no matter what shithole I was in or how bad that day was going to end up or how bad the day was the day before, when I had that 5 minutes with that cup of coffee, it was sort of that sanctuary.
Life was good.
It was. It's like, okay, you know what? It's probably going to be a mess later, or man, so-and-so got hit. That sucks. But for that 5 minutes, it was like, okay, it's a little taste of home. It's a little bit of right on. And I guess that's why coffee is important to me, and anybody else that spent any time overseas probably say the same thing.
Now, what have your experiences, your disciplines, and the values that you gained by being a SEAL, how have those impacted the way you've pursued starting your businesses and running your business?
Here's what I love about startups, and it makes me feel like I'm a platoon commander again, because what I did when I was a platoon commander is I would get a mission tasking. And from there, I would go and I would plan this thing. I would figure out, okay, what do we need to execute this? What are timelines? Who are the people that we want to do this? And then start going through contingencies. Okay, if this happens here, what are we going to do? If this happens here, what are we going to do? What are our fallback plans? And that's the same way I've approached a startup company. It really is the same thing. You put together a team of people who each have their, I would say, specific strength. And then you figure out timelines as far as, okay, we need to be here by this date and here by this date. Ultimately, we're going to be launching by this date. Wait, what equipment are we going to need to be able to do that, to include financing? And you put all these pieces together. And then the most important part is, okay, you've planned for success. And then the platoon commander that comes out on me is like, okay, what happens if we lose that supplier? What happens if all of a sudden delivery is an issue? And start going through all those, what are we going to do when things go terribly wrong? And that's great because, in a small company, you really only get one shot. And if you don't have those plan Bs, those contingencies set up, well, congratulations, you're going to go look to start up another company because that one's probably done. Especially when people are expecting something delivered by a certain time with a certain quality. And again, I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's great.
Is failure an option?
Absolutely not. No, I might be stuck in a warehouse with thousands of pounds of coffee bean, but we'll get through it.
Well, I know that's something that you guys live and breathe, going through BUDS and the SEALs is failure is simply not an option.
Well, I tell you what, and that's the other great thing about Doorbean. And this is an all military own and run company. And I love that because I have my family again. I've got my mission again. And as a result, sort of an identity. And, hopefully in a year from now, when we bring all of the operations to Austin, I can't wait to be able to look out and see guys all tatted up with a prosthetic leg and maybe a prosthetic arm, and they're roasting and they're fulfilling. And hey, guess what? It's 4:00 on a Friday. Everybody stop work. You know what comes next. It is. It's very rewarding in a different sort of way. Obviously, SEAL team is a young man's game, but I get to live it again a little bit in this way, and it's been great.
That's awesome. What does it mean to you to be a self-made man? What does that mean to you?
I tell you what, it's a combination of having the confidence and the capability to do whatever comes at you. It's the ability to overcome any obstacle and come out the other side with a smile on your face, knowing that, yeah, I did that. And that really is it. There's nothing that's too difficult. There's no question you can't answer. It might take a little while, but it really is a total self-reliant attitude, I think. And then in addition to that, it's helping others that don't. But it is. It's, hey, I made it through BUDS with multiple broken legs. Hey, we made it through that nasty firefight. Everybody's still here. Hey, I'm going to be a very successful owner of a business that sells coffee. That's it in my role.
Awesome, brother. Cade Courtley, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I cannot wait to do round 2 with you. Real quick, where can everybody go to learn more about SEAL Survival and your coffee business?
So SEAL Survival is at sealsurvival.com, and then Doorbean is at doorbean.com, and order up now.
Awesome, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next round.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Mike.